We will start the recording today. Our program today is Ask, Don't Tell. And it's going to be, this is a repeat. I've done this before back in 1922, but a lot of things have come up and I've made some changes. And so I thought I'd go with it again today. But we'll do it just a little bit differently in that normally whenever I share these things, I just do the talking and then later we stop the recording and others will make comments. And so what I'd like to this time is if you have something, kind of brief that we could just have a small discussion, well, feel feel at liberty to make a comment, okay? So I'm going to share the screen and we're talking about ask, don't tell. So is that showing? Can you see what I'm doing?
Starting to, yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So, I'm going to start off with looking at the relationship question that Dr. Glasser proposed quite some time today. For us to ask ourselves, is what I am doing drawing us closer together or is it driving us further apart? And to actually ask that question of ourselves again and again and again and again and again, because we're always changing. We're always. And so we're thinking about what we are doing, how we are acting, what we are thinking, how we are expressing ourselves, whether it's harsh or smooth or soft. And so whenever we are working with others, how are we relating to them? How can they relate with us? And to continually ask ourselves. And so, in going along with the relationship question that Dr. Glasser proposed, are we connecting with others or are we disconnecting with them? And maybe some of the thoughts that may be disconnecting, and if you might want to add some to it, is have you ever said to anyone, why don't you? And how did they receive that? You know, uh, because they had this idea and we come up, but why don't you this way? Or maybe to ask them, if I were you, I would. So again, how is that connecting or is it disconnecting? And then sometimes to come up, well, have you thought of? As though, they're not thinking individuals. But what are some of the questions that we may ask whenever we're wanting to talk with someone and find out some information? And rather than just telling them, it's more important to ask. So I have proposed 3 self-evaluating questions. And I would say that for 20 plus years, I worked with the Federal Bureau of Prisons and taught life skills to those that were going through they called it a halfway house, but I was always telling them there's no way. You're just one step closer to being released. You are not halfway. And so if we can look at evaluating questions, and actually I had more than 3, but I failed to refocus this. So I like to ask people, I'm curious, did you have someone in your life that warned you of possible harm or dangers? See, it's not coming out and saying, well, didn't so-and-so tell you something? We need to think it through ourselves, because as we can think it through ourselves, then we can begin to expand on the past or the present. Another question, once you were warned about what? About drug, alcohol, about speeding, about abuses. Once you were warned, did you immediately see the light and begin to change? Or was it still kind of, I'm going to do what I want to do and see it the way I'm going to see it? And then many, many times I would have the residents, the inmates tell me how that they're going to work with the youth and how they're going to tell them. So do you think you're telling them will really make a difference? And I don't mean that ugly and indifferent, but how much do you really think telling them anything is going to make a difference? but maybe it's more about helping them to think about and come to their own conclusion. And then what is the underlying message we give people when we tell them what to do, when we tell them what they are doing and how it is affecting everything? And so, how can we become relatable? How can we become relatable? Well, I personally want to make contact with everyone. I want to be, I want to see them eyeball to eyeball. I want to shake their hand. I want to greet them whenever they come in. Whenever I want to make a contact and be relatable to those that are present. So here's some suggestions on just asking for permission to give suggestions and then respecting their wishes. Then respecting what they have to say. Not to agreement, but so that we can maybe more understand where they're coming from. And do not give the answer before a question is asked. How many times are we wanting to solve a problem for someone without finding out what all the increments are? We must agree that there is a problem before we can explore an answer to the problem. If the other person cannot see what we're talking about, and I use that a lot when I'm working with people, can you see yourself doing this? Can you see yourself not doing this? As we can begin to see ourselves and begin to believe in the fact that we are self-determining, then we can begin to look at and see if I am hurting myself, I am hurting others, or am I getting better? We must see that we are vulnerable before we're willing to set any boundaries. We need to see the fact that, if I do what I'm wanting to do, I'm vulnerable for greater fees coming against me, for greater disparity coming for me. When we conclude on our own, then we are more open to insight, and to change, to beginning to change becomes easier. When we begin to think about ourselves, when we begin to think that, well, did that work for me the last time? No, it really didn't. So how can I make effective changes? Then as we give specific feedback, will help us to reinforce the behaviors that we are teaching. For example, I would take the prisoners to some local events if they were in 100% program, program adhering 100% to the program. And so one time I took this one man, he just disappeared. And that's not ever good, to have a prisoner with you in your, and we were walking back to the facility, and all of a sudden he just showed up. Well, I had my thoughts as to where he was and what he was doing or so forth. But anyway, we need to give specific feedback that will reinforce the behavior we are teaching. And so I thanked him for showing up and being there to walk back to the facility with us and to go in. But I let him know right up front, I will not take you anywhere else. Because they have agreed verbally that if, it needs to be followed through on. And so it's just letting life present itself, it's truth or consequences. That if we, and reminding the other person that you agreed to this truth. And so now it's time to set the boundary and follow through with it, proving to yourself that you are trustworthy. So I find that most people are open to feedback if we don't force it upon them. And so the same thing with this guy. A couple of weeks later, I was going to take some of the residents that were in 100% program compliant to an event. and I always had a sign-in sheet. And this particular young man that had skipped out when we were before, he had written his name there. Well, I marked it out. So he came to see me back to my office. He said, why's my name marked out? And I said, well, if I couldn't trust you, I need you to be trusted. Oh, but I am. I find I'm not going to force it upon you, but I'm not taking you. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And I am not putting myself in the position to have you put not only myself, but to put you and the other residents that would go with us in jeopardy themselves. So it's just not worth it. If you find resistance in them, change the subject and move on. And that's exactly what I did with the young man. Yeah, you can go ahead, you can think, you can get mad at me, whatever you need to do. But I do encourage you to think about it and to see um, how that you are harming yourself as well as others. And then also to help ask pertinent questions to get the person thinking in a new vein. Is this really the kind of way that you want people to treat you? Then how can you treat them differently? The purpose in asking self-evaluation questions is not to get the person to rattle off some answers or to come back with yeah, but it's just simply to give them something to think about whenever we are not in contact with each other. And the purpose is to give them something to privately consider and to come to a conclusion. So here's just a few more suggestions in working with it. Focus on self-evaluation versus feedback. I mean, I can give you some feedback, but I want to help you to self-evaluate. And I will ask them right up front. I'm going to ask you some questions, but I'm not looking for an answer. I just want you to think about it. What do you hope to accomplish through this particular action or through the things that you are saying, the things that you are thinking, or the way you are going? What do you hope to accomplish? What do you think the end result will be? What are you doing to help you meet your goal of being released from being incarcerated and maybe to never come back again, hopefully to have the purpose of never coming back again? What are you doing to help you meet the goal of giving up cigarettes, of having a healthier relationship, of driving each other together rather than pushing each other away? What will you do if things do not go as you assume they will? And are you assuming? And how does assuming things cause us to become dictatorial? What else can you do? I like to ask that a lot. What else can you do? What else can you do? Or what resources do you need? Who do you need to talk with? Who might be able to give you some input that would really be meaningful to you? And then always to establish kind of a benchmark. As you help establish a point of reference, then the person can begin to gauge for themselves their own behavior. And the more thought-provoking our insights are, whether they're questions or comments, the more effective the individual can self-evaluate. And so, leave the final decision up to the individual, regardless of the consequences. Whether they are seeing and beginning to agree, whether they are completely against it, because we are free will agents. We are all self-determining. What is your motive when advising another? If they take your advice and the consequences are favorable, then rejoice with them and don't take credit for their decision. So yes, you gave them a plan, you gave them some thoughts, and then they took it and ran with it. Then it's no longer yours. It's no longer you that was doing anything. And it's acknowledging that and realizing, maybe being thankful. You may have given them the information, but they're the ones that bought the ticket and got on the bus. They're the ones that made the decision and followed through. If they ignore the principles and life continues in the downward spiral, again, it's not on you, but do have compassion for their misery and do continue to be an encourager. You know, I tell, well, I told the prisoners, but now I tell a lot of people also, I see something in you that you can't see in yourself. And I really would like for you to be able to see that you do have more power to overcome difficult situations than you give yourself credit for. And so it's never give up, never give up, never give up, never give up. It's not to keep, it's not to henpeck, it's not to keep thrashing in on, but to realize that this is an individual that has infinite worth and value, and they can learn. People can learn. We can change. So we want to carry the message, but not the person. Carry the message. And to me, the message is each person is self-determining, even if they choose destructive behavior. Even if they listen to your sage advice or not, they are all self-determining. The message is you must do it yourself. There are others that can come along and help you, but I will not carry you. I will not even try to do it for you because you are a free will agent. The message is I can give you tools, but I cannot use them for you. The message is there are other perspectives for you to consider, but I cannot make you receive them. I cannot make you be open to them. The message is there is help, but I will not force it upon you. I will not argue with you. I will not. I will not. So, in looking at what is the best way to help, is it telling someone what to do, or is it asking some relatable questions that leads that individual to be accountable for their own results and growth? And as you learn to ask those thought-provoking questions, will it lead the individual to self-evaluate his own personal accountability? Well, I find that it will. I find that it does. Even if it takes a while, it may not happen, there's not these instant things to happen. But it's about helping the person to come to terms with who they are and with who they want to be. So I thank you for your attention and for your thoughts. And I will turn the recording off